I've been reflecting on my MOT experience, and I think there are 4 main things I'm going to take away from it. Number 1, an absolute wreck of a car rolled off a transporter onto my driveway not 2 months ago. The timing belt snapped in my hands. To dare to dream that we could get that car through an MOT within 2 months, well, that's something to be proud of. The second point is that I'm also very proud of the work that I did, because it all worked, and none of the reasons that the car failed its MOT were related to that. And it also means I don't have to do that terribly disheartening thing of undoing work that I've done and trying to redo it again better. The third thing is I finally got to drive it. I've been looking at this thing endlessly, putting hours and hours of blood, sweat and tears into it, and I had no idea what it was like to drive. Well, now at least I have a taste. It didn't drive brilliantly because, well, the brakes were binding, so the performance was being held back. It was making funny noises and funny smells. The alignment was out, the handling was off, but it didn't matter. I got a sense of what it was like, and also I got to sit in the seats that I rebuilt and look at the dashboard that I rebuilt, which didn't squeak or rattle, by the way, and that alone was worth the £45 to get the MOT done. Best of all though, I now have a definitive to-do list. The emissions I think I can sort with some help from people that I've met on this journey, and maybe I'll fabricate a little homemade diagnostics kit to lean the car out a little bit, and that should be enough. It isn't out by much, so it won't take much. It could just need a good drive to clear its lungs. And the brakes, well, I've got 3 options. I could upgrade them for 1,200 quid, that's too expensive. I could swap them out for pre-refurbed ones, but that wouldn't seem right, so I'm going to refurb them. That means that it'll be more intricate and more involved, but it means I get to do more videos, which is great, and also I get to know the car a little better, which is what this whole thing has been about. Oh yeah, and also it's about 450 quid versus 750 for the swap outs. So stick with me. Project Elan is not over, but thank you, because honestly, if it wasn't for your support and love, except for that one clown who doesn't know how an MOT works, this just wouldn't have been as much fun. So thanks. As the recommissioning has progressed, there have been lots of little small jobs that I've done that I haven't had the time to share with you because I've been so focused on getting the big stuff done. But I thought now, as I'm waiting for parts to come in, might be a good opportunity to share a few of them with you. And one of which is this antenna. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but to me, this is one of the first things that I did, and I'm really pleased with it. It's actually a roof antenna, just a generic one that I found on Amazon, I think. But it's also a DAB antenna. Now, fitting it is a bit of a faff because obviously this is fiberglass, so you have to find ways of earthing it and putting material in around the back of it to amplify. But the reception is absolutely spectacular on it, and I really like sort of the stubby modern look that it gives it and the rather rakish angle. So that's a Connor Bodge I'm really pleased with. What I'm less impressed with is my gasket. Not only does it look like I've cut it with my teeth, it doesn't really do the job it's supposed to do, which is keep water out. It's better than what was there, which was no gasket. However, I wasn't about to pay £70 for a used set on eBay. However, since then I found brand new ones for sale for 12 quid, so they're going in as soon as they arrive, and I'm really pleased with that. I'm also mindful that I never actually gave you a close-up of my crack. Yeah, I heard that too. But anyway, here it is. And it's not quite flush. It looks like there's a gap there, but that's actually all bonded. So once I get a bit of touch up into that, I think that'll look okay. In the underside, again, give that a bit of a dusting with Hammerite, just to take the shiny look off the rivets. But that'll all be covered up eventually with the chin spoiler. And there's also an under tray to go in there. What I won't be putting back in is this, which is the original under tray. Well, I say original, it's the one that was on the car when I got it. It's a piece of sheet metal, which I think is the same stuff that they made the fan shroud out of. It's not only horrible, but absolutely lethal. Can you imagine if that thing came off at speed? I've spent much of my day immersed in very deep geekdom. I have built myself a little engine diagnostics machine, and here's how it looks. Up there you've got a little 10-pin GM engine diagnostics plug, which has then been spliced and soldered to this little thing called an FTDI chip here, and then that's talking to my laptop via a USB cable, and it's being read by a piece of software written many moons ago by a man named Alan McNichol, so thanks to him. Now there's lots of information on here, and at this stage I don't know whether these values I'm looking at are good or bad. Well, I do like this one where it says false 0, so that's encouraging. But what I will do is I will take this information away and look it up online, and hopefully using that information I'll be able to get to the bottom of my slight emissions problem. Maybe with a little bit of leaning out and a little adjustment, even to like the idle speed. It idles at around 1000 RPM, which is to me a little high. A few small adjustments might be enough to get it through its MOT. So hopefully a little bit of information, a little bit of nerding it up online, I might be able to get to the bottom of this without incurring a big bill. That's the hope. So while I had all my tools out, I thought, well, let's get started on the Lotus, because I have to take all the calipers off and the brake discs off. These need to be replaced and the calipers need to be fully refurbed, and I need to change the pads as well, and they need to be cleaned, and also I need to paint them because the red is frankly offensive. I was really nervous about these because any part of the car that's exposed to road crud can often be a real ball ache to get off, but they have absolutely flown off. The first two came off in about an hour. This has taken, so far, it's ready to come off, it's taken about 20 minutes. The front one hopefully will be about the same, and that'll be it. They'll be off, they'll be on the bench ready for me to start working on them tomorrow. And I'm really happy about that. You know, the Mini's worked with me today and the Lotus has worked with me today. So cars can be really frustrating sometimes, but they can also work with you sometimes, and that's it's a wonderful thing. It's nice because I've had a pretty shitty couple of days and I needed a bit of a lift, so thank you, cars. This weekend was meant to be about putting the brakes back on the car, but as you can see, that's probably not going to happen now. The reason for that is when I started stripping the calipers, I unearthed quite a few hidden horrors, so I have to order some new parts in, and that's going to delay me by a few days. I'll tell you about that later on, but in the meantime I've plenty to be getting on with, including getting these ready to receive all the new bits. This needs a proper degrease inside and out. This horrible paint needs to be stripped off, and a coat of something considerably less offensive needs to go on. The brake discs have arrived. The front ones are going to be an easy job. The rear's a bit more of a faff, but again, I'll tell you about that later on. And the other things I need to be thinking about this weekend are the other failure points for the MOT, including the headlamps and the emissions. And I think I've got a plan for both of those as well. And if all that isn't enough, I have my snag list to work through, all these little jobs that aren't critical, but the car won't be finished until they're done. So if I can get one or two of those done this weekend, I'll consider that a good weekend's work. Sit back and relax and let me take you through what I discovered as I started to strip the brakes. Now there's too much to fit into one video, so there might be a few of these, so bear with. I'll start off with the sliders. Now there's two of these on each caliper, and that's basically what's used to bolt the brakes to the car. Now the caliper needs to be able to slide in and out on these so that the pads can locate themselves on the disc. And these need to be able to move freely. All 8 of them dry as a bone, and worse than that, the bores, the little cylinders that they sit in, have been painted. I don't know if you can see that one. I know this one, it's even more obvious. So that boggles the mind, because if you know enough to be able to take these apart to paint them, surely you would know that you don't paint the inside of the slider bores. This is one of the front sliders, and you can actually see it's got a little sort of a reddy brown paste on it, and that's where the paint has started to break down and mix with whatever little bit of grease was in there. So you have no lubrication, you have an extra coat of paint inside there, and then it starts to break down and create this paste and these clumps. So how these were meant to work, I don't know. Next up, the rear brake pistons. Now the pistons on the rear do the normal piston-y thing of you squirt brake fluid in here, that forces the piston up, that squeezes the pad against the discs, and the brakes work. But it also has a second job to do, which is to work the handbrake, and it does that using this little actuator. So what happens is you pull the lever, and as you can see, that will drive the piston forward, and so it acts on the brakes mechanically. Quite simple, quite clever. But at the back of the caliper, there's meant to be a bunch of seals around here. There's 2 of them. There's this nylon seal, and then there's this little washer, this anti-friction washer with a hexagon shape to it. Neither of those were on the passenger side, so the handbrake lever was acting on the caliper metal on metal, and also letting a bunch of crud get down inside. I've tried everywhere to find these and I can't, so I've had to get a whole new actuator screw for one side at the cost of about £15, so thanks for that. The other thing that's missing on one of them is this. This is the little piston locator. That goes around the piston and sits inside the cylinders on both sides, and it's a slightly asymmetrical shape, and its job is to compensate for pad wear. Because it's an asymmetrical shape, as the piston tries to retract, it squeezes against this and holds it in place. It's very clever. Without it though, what it means is that on one side, when you put up the handbrake, you've got a pad right near the disc and it gets a nice tight squeeze, but on the other side, because of the pad wear, the pad is too far away from the disc, so when you put up the handbrake, it isn't getting anywhere near enough purchase on it. So effectively, I only had half a handbrake. And then there are the myriad of other small little things that are wrong, like all the seals, for example, were fused to the caliper body because, I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's paint on the insides. So it looks like the calipers had been reassembled while the paint was still wet. These are the little front brake pad, so locator pins. These are meant to be smooth and clean, and they're just covered in crust and corrosion, and a right nightmare to get out. These are the rear pads. This is one of them, and again, just a layer of crust and corrosion. It had fused itself onto the rear piston. And then the pièce de résistance, which is the front pads, instead of using copper grease to stop them squeaking, a bit of gaffer tape, that'll do. Much of yesterday was spent in the very tedious pursuit of applying paint stripper to the calipers and repeatedly scraping the paint off. Now, after about 3 applications, it became obvious that the stripper wasn't really having much more of an effect, so that's when I got the little wire brush out and really got stuck in. Now, I'm really happy with the results overall, but to be honest with you, I wouldn't have bothered with any of that were it not for the fact that the slider bores had paint in them, and that's really what I wanted to get to. Now, the paint stripper didn't actually do the job that I wanted to do. There was still a little bit of residue left, so I ended up having to get 7000 grit sandpaper with a little bit of white spirit, tear it into strips, and then just get in there and tickle the last of it off. But I'm really pleased with the results, because the sliders, these, remember, I had to hammer out when I took the calipers apart first. They now move smoothly inside the bores with just enough tolerance around them for a little layer of grease. So I'm really pleased with those. And actually the sliders themselves, they're actually perfect. I didn't really need to be replacing those, but they're part of the kit, so they will be replaced. All that's left now is to mask off the areas that I don't want paint in again and apply a top coat. So I toyed with quite a few colors. Silver I didn't want to do because they're off-the-shelf calipers and they look it, and silver just emphasizes that fact. The red, as I saw, is hideous because it clashes with everything in the car. I did think about Norfolk yellow, but that tends to highlight the fact that they're off-the-shelf calipers, so I've gone for black. I think it'll clean up the look as you look through the wheels. I think it masks the fact that they're quite ordinary calipers. I think it's quite a modern colour as well, and best of all, it'll mask the dirt as well, so black it is. I'm back from watching the Formula 1, and while I was away, my calipers have dried. Well, they're touch dry at least. I painted them in black enamel, and I'm quite happy with how they've turned out, to be honest. They just need to have all the masking tape taken off. They need to be given a deep clean internally, and then they'll be ready for the refurb kit. And the discs, they're usually a pretty easy job. You just undo a retaining screw and off they pop. In this case, it just popped off because the retaining screw had been sheared off. I've had to drill it out to accept a new screw when I put the new discs on. The new discs themselves are standard off-the-shelf Vauxhall items, I believe. 256mm standard steel vented disc brakes. Nothing fancy, but they'll do the job, and they're only 20 quid each. Around the back, a bit more of a faff, I'm afraid, because the rear discs are part of the whole rear hub assembly, so the whole lot has to be swapped out, but it's not as much of a faff as you would think. Dust cap, cotter pin, retaining bolt, washer, bearing, and the whole lot pops out in your hands. I've been lucky in that I've got 2 replacement discs and hubs for about 60 quid each, and they include the bearings as well, so that saves me a whole lot of hassle having to change those out. So all I have to do is put all that back together in the reverse order, pack it full of axle grease, and that will be that. So all I'm waiting for now is my refurb kit, and once I put the calipers back together, they should be quick and easy to put on, fill it full of brake fluid, reattach the handbrake, bleed the system, and that should be it for brakes. One step closer to getting that MOT. So I'm just checking the engine timing, and unfortunately the video isn't going to be able to catch that properly, I don't think. But basically what it amounts to is that this should be reading 16 degrees before top dead center, and it's actually reading like 8. So the timing is out. I knew it would be. I knew it was. So that could be a big reason why my car is not passing its emissions. So now it's time to go and adjust that, and that's a really tricky thing to do because I have to adjust this little thing here, the cam angle sensor, by the tiniest amounts. Normally it's a two-man job. I'm gonna have to wing it today, I'm afraid. Wish me luck. Oh, before I do that, I just want to show you this. So the car is in, you have to put the car into diagnostics mode. You see the little engine light flashing over there, and that's done by quite simply shorting out the ADLD, the little diagnostics thing. It's a really simple system, it's actually really clever, but yeah, it just means that with a 20-pound timing gun you can pretty much, oh, and a 6mm hex wrench, pretty much set your own timing, which is awesome. And one of the last jobs that I've tasked myself with this weekend is adjusting the headlamps, because not only are they pointing in the wrong directions, but they're also not sitting very well in the body. I was so happy just to get them working before that I didn't really think about how they were mounted, but it occurred to me the other day when I was looking at one of the doors that every other hinged panel in the car has shims, so why wouldn't the headlamp pods? So I did a bit of work on the passenger side, and sure enough, not only did I get it sitting beautifully in the body, it also points in the right direction now. And if you think about it, previously the headlamp would lift and it was pointing at the sky. When I put a few shims in at the rear, that lowered the angle that the headlamps were facing, and that meant that I was able to adjust my beam in a bit more of a sensible direction. So I'm going to do the same on this side, and then hopefully that again will take me one other small step towards getting this Lotus through its MOT.